Hello dear chess friends of International Chess School. In this lecture we will continue to discuss about the attack against the king in the center. This can be happened when the king lost the right to castle, or when the king is stuck in the center and the opponent focuses on delaying the opponent's castle until the attack became decisive. Usually black is the one to fall with the king under the attack, but in the next example, a game played in November 2011 between the grandmasters Vaida Levente from Romania, rated 2584, and Friedman Daniel from Germany, with the black pieces rated 2661. White was the one to fall under the attack. It was a French advance: e4, e6, d4, d5, knight c3, knight f6, e5, knight ft7, f4, c5. I noticed that when white tries to create such impressive pawn structure right from the beginning, it may fall behind in development, and black has to pay attention to the smallest detail in this case, since on long term white has the space advantage, and from statical point of view he has the advantage. Knight f3, knight c6, bishop e3, and queen b6, a very strong move which uses the immediate consequence of bishop e3, which leaves b2 unprotected. Why the king in the center can be the subject of an attack, and how this has happened? This is often a consequence of the fact that the battle between the players begins around the central files, around the center, and it is very predictable that some important files or diagonals could be opened there. Knight a4, defending the pawn and attacking the queen. You can find a similar video with this variation in the month dedicated to the French defense. Queen a5 check and c3. White continues to spend a lot of moves with the pawns, and these are creating the pawns on dark squares are creating some weak squares on light squares behind and around the pawns. So a logical conclusion could be here for black to exchange the powerful white's light square bishop, which also can create dangerous threats on b1 h7 diagonal against the black short castle, and he played b6. This is a typical idea for the French defense, where black wants to get rid of the light square's bishop. What's interesting in this line is that black will not retake with the knight on a6 after bishop a6, bishop a6, but with the queen, and this is an extra advantage, since anyway the queen has to take control over the light squares in the absence of the light square bishop. The other possibility could be c takes d4, which leads to a highly complicated position where black is ready to sacrifice a knight for 3 pawns. After b4, knight takes b4, c takes b4, bishop b4, bishop d2, bishop takes d2, knight takes d2, short castle, bishop d3, and b5. Here also black will try to retain white's king in the center as long as possible, but the real idea behind this variation is to start a pawn storm and to increase the pieces activity behind the pawns, and to use the misplaced position of knight a4. Even on b2 the knight will be restricted by black pawns. Why to sacrifice material when you can go for the attack with the natural means, with a lower degree of commitment? Try to do the moves with fewer obligation before the moves with higher commitment. b6, preparing bishop a6, and now there are two ideas behind this move: bishop a6 and to threat c takes d4, and at some point to use the awkward position of the knight from a4. For this reason, bishop d2 was perfectly justified, because this makes black to push c4 in order to avoid this powerful idea with bishop d3, and to create some threats against the ugly looking knight from a4. But after b4, of course, c takes b3 is not a convenient exchange. Queen b5, knight b2, white will be regrouping the knight, and he's favored by the closed pawn structure, since he lost a lot of moves creating this impressive pawn structure. Knight e7, queen c2, and the queen side will be blocked. I think black will castle long, and he will try to push f7, f6, while white will be will build his to-do list around the pawn thrust f4, f5. In the game, white played a strange move here, king f2. He preferred to unpin the king this way. It looks that black can't reach e4 or g4 with a knight, but these are long-term weaknesses. Black can't reach for the time being those squares, and the king from f2 seems to be well protected by the bishop from e3. But in fact, this is an artificial setup. The knight is isolated on a4, which will imply further loss of time, and from now on black will take the initiative, and it led to a very interesting mate attack against this king in the center. To carry out such an attack successfully, it is important first of all to imagine the mating patterns, and I think the top GM like Friedman Daniel started to do this right now, already from the 10th move. He played bishop a6. The first idea is to get rid of the light square's bishop in order to stress the vulnerability of the light squares in white's camp. It is not clear which is the minimum number of preconditions of premises, or what kind of advantage is needed to launch an attack against the enemy king. But such preparatory moves like bishop a6 are always extremely important. You always need to have a clear idea about what you want, and now you want to stress the vulnerability of this king from f2, which lost the right to castle, and which is stuck around the center. If you cannot imagine a long-term plan, then you should create small to-do list and look for the moves that makes small improvements of your position. And this move is meant to weaken the light squares. It's a small to-do list. Trade the light squares bishop and try to weaken the light squares. D takes c5. Again, I suppose that b4 was needed here. White played d takes c5, and bishop takes f1. White played b4. He put all his hopes in this intermediate move, hoping that black will play something like queen b5, and then he can take with the rook and fulfill the castle by hand with king g1, and then to create a sort of pressure along the f file with the rook from f1. White supposed that he's better developed, and this extra king moves won't be felt. But now it's black's turn. He identified white's threat, which is b takes a5. He's an extra bishop, and when his queen is attacked, he always has the possibility to attack the enemy queen. And he took advantage of the overloaded queen from d1 and played bishop e2. Now the queen from d1 can take on e2 because the knight from a4 is hanging, which means that white will be forced to take with the king. I think queen takes e2, sorry, b takes a5 is not an option, because after bishop takes d1, rook h takes d1, black has the possibility to play b5. Now the knight from a4 is dominated. There's no good path for this knight, and after knight b2, knight c5, the knight from c5 came closer at the proximity of the white king, and at the same time controls the d3 square. I believe black has a serious advantage here, noticing that the pawn from a5 is also hanging, and after that the black knight can use another weak light square, the square c4. So white was forced to take with the king, king e2. He already moved the king twice in the opening, and the king is not so well protected now in the absence of the light square's bishop. Queen b5 check. So the black queen escaped with tempo from the attack. King f2, b takes c5, a3. Of course, white tries to consolidate. He's with the king in the middle, so it has to avoid the opening of important diagonals or files around the king. a5. On the other hand, black is sure that the white king will remain around the center for few next moves, so he tries to open the files. Now the best answer for white was to regroup the knight with knight b2, where after a takes b4, a takes b4, rook takes a1, queen takes a1, c takes b4. White is a pawn down, but at least he gained some activity for his pieces. After queen a8, knight db8. Of course, this is the most precise move, since it restricts the activity of white's queen. Queen a4, queen takes a4, knight takes a4, bishop e7, and black has an extra pawn, but a difficult endgame is in front of him, since white will be the first to activate his rook with rook c1. So instead of knight b2 here, white played b takes c5. Somehow it's justified by the fact that white opens the b file, where it can attack the queen from b5, and at the same time it releases the d4 square for the knight. The problem is that the black queen has an ideal square on c4 from where it can attack the f4 pawn, and also takes under control the important e4 square. Another drawback of b takes c5 for white is that it helped black to bring his knight into the battle. Now white has to take with the knight to get rid of this passive outside knight from a4. Instead, he gave away the dark square's bishop. Black took with the bishop on c5, and now white played king g3. The king is extremely exposed there in the absence of the dark square's bishop and of the light square bishop. White didn't realize that black is in charge with the game now. He tried to use the fact that the queen can be overloaded here to defend the bishop from c5 and to defend against such threats with rook b1, rook b7. But from statical point of view, the king's position assessment plays an important role. And while the black king is safe, it needs only one move to castle. The white king is already in deep trouble. After king g3, black preserved the last bishop. Any endgame will be favorable for black with this bishop, because there are a lot of pawns on the dark squares. But the main reason is that the bishop can be coordinated with the queen, and these squares will be the targets. These are the focal squares around the white king. Rook b1, queen c4. Now again it was the moment for white to get rid of that useless knight from a4 with knight b6, bishop takes, rook takes, a4, fixing the pawn weakness on a3, queen f1, knight a5, queen takes c4, knight takes c4, rook b4, short castle, rook a1, and rook fc8. At least white has some hopes to survive in this position, even if the position is difficult. And when white's pieces will be tied up in defending those queenside weaknesses, the king can choose this way to penetrate in white's camp. Instead of knight b6, white played queen b3 here, which looks perfectly normal move. It threatens to exchange the queens, which will solve all white's defensive problems, because the black queen is the coordinator of the attack, and at the same time white is threatening queen b7, giving double attack to the rook from a8 and the knight from c6. This is the critical moment of the game, and here black started the attack over the white's king with the price of a knight sacrifice. And in order to conduct the attack successfully, it's important to imagine mapping patterns. And black played queen e4, imagining that with the queen on f4 and the bishop on e3, a mating possibility will be after queen takes f4 to put the bishop on f2 and then to deliver a mate with queen h5, or the queen somewhere along the h5. Secondly, you have to prepare a mating net, and this is important. White's king cannot escape when after bishop e3, queen takes f4, the white king cannot escape neither on f2, either on h2. So it will be stuck on these two squares, g3 and h3. And another important idea was to bring another piece into the battle, which is not right obvious. Black will have the queen, the bishop, and he imagined a possibility to bring a rook by playing rook c8, rook c4, and then support the queen over the fourth rank. Actually, the a7 g1 diagonal, the f4 h2 diagonal, and the fourth rank are playing an important role in the attack. So Black decided to start an uncompromising attack involving the sacrifice of a knight. He played queen e4. White continued with queen b7, short castle, and queen takes c6. Bishop e3 followed. Another important element is that the knight from a4 is under attack, and the position of the white queen on c6 is artificial, and on his way to c4 the rook will also attack the queen, and after rook c4 controlling the fourth rank, the knight from a4 will be hanging. Studying this position, of course, foreseeing this position, Black decided to sacrifice the knight. Otherwise, this attack won't be possible. So the first phase, in the first phase, to keep the white king in the center, Black was helped because white played by his own will king f2, and then king e2, king f2 back, and king g3. The premises existed in the position: the weakening along the light squares, then the disappearance of the dark squares bishop. All Black has to do now is to amplify the activity of his pieces, and this will be extremely easy when the king is exposed, and the activization of Black's rook will imply mating threats. King h3, queen f4. Now confronted with a simple threat like h5 followed by queen g4, white played rook h f1. And now if h5, white is ready to answer with g3, because now the knight from f3 is protected. Queen h6, white queen h6, to force white to occupy the g3 square, so it removes the possibility to escape on light squares. Black wants to keep this king on dark squares because h2 and f2 are easy to be controlled by Black's queen and bishop. Rook ac8, queen d7, rook c4. Now you see the power behind this incredible rook lift. Rook c8, rook c4. White threatens mate in two moves: queen f4 check, queen g4 mate. So h4. Now after queen f4, king h3, king g4, white founded h2 square, which wasn't available with the pawn on h2. But after rook a4, Black ended up with an extra pawn, and White's position is awful. There's a lack of coordination between his pieces. The queen is isolated in Black's camp, while there are a lot of weak dark squares around the white king, which was in danger already from the move king e1 to f2. g3, rook takes a3. The rook will take advantage of the new released second rank. Knight g5. Actually, white is preparing a subtle trap here. He's threatening queen takes f7, and if rook takes f7, then rook b8 check, rook f8 back, and rook takes b8 mate. Such conjunctural attacks cannot succeed. Black has to trust that he did everything by the book, and the problem is that bishop takes g5 doesn't work because the f7 square, the focal point f7, is attacked 3 times. All black has to do is to interfere a piece along the f file. He foreseen this also. He played rook a2 check, king h1, and now either bishop f2 or rook f2, as it was played in the game, reduces white's counterplay to 0. Now there's no point in sacrificing the queen, since black will take, and after rook b8 he will simply return with the rook on f8, as the rook from f1 cannot is annihilated by rook f2. Rook takes f2, bishop takes, queen d6. White is preparing rook b8 to put some pressure on this rook, but the black king is well defended, and after queen g3 white resigned. Rook b8 doesn't work because of queen g1 mate, and black has a lot of threats like queen takes h4, or h7 h6, simply to gain the knight. I hope you can follow the plan when the enemy king is in the center, that you realized how important is to play with a purpose. In the opening, even in the opening, how important it was to do small moves like b6 and bishop e6, weakening a whole complex of light squares, and how important it was to increase the initiative when the enemy king was in danger, even with the price of a minor piece. Till our next lecture.